Welcome to Rapid Fire Review, the series where I review games fast. Over the course of my 3D Sonic marathon, I've gotten quite a few comments asking for reviews of those other 3D Sonic titles. Games like 3D Blast, Shadow the Hedgehog, Sonic Boom, Dream Team, etc. I also got a few asking me to cover the alternate versions of games that I did review, such as Unleashed for Wii and PS2 and Lost World for the 3DS. Now, I wasn't particularly interested in making full-length retrospectives of these games, seeing as they didn't impact the main series as much. However, these are notable releases, and I agree that they should get at least some mention, so I decided to make a compromise. Rapid Fire Review, RFR for short, is a brand new series where I review multiple games under a similar theme within a short time span. Think of it as my way of covering games that I wouldn't otherwise. Now, full disclosure, for the sake of time, I did not finish every single one of these games. Because of this, I'll be focusing on critiquing the core design and game loop, rather than the experience as a whole. These reviews are not holistic assessments of each game's content. Consider them more so as recommendations to look into them yourself if what I have to say about the core gameplay interests you. In a normal retrospective, this would be going completely against my rules, but again, this series is a compromise, so I better not get 5,000 comments calling me a bad reviewer for not reading every single game. This video is for fun. Don't take it too seriously. Finally, I know I often apologize for footage quality if it's not up to my 1080p 60fps standard, but I'm not kidding around this time. The footage for a few of these games is bad. In Dream Team's case, I recorded it on a friend's computer without the rigorous testing I usually do, so I blame myself for that one. For any other games with below par footage, blame the emulator or the console I played on. I promise I tried my best. With all that out of the way, and with my audience retention completely destroyed, this is Rapid Fire Review. Sonic 3D Blast released in 1996 for the Sega Genesis and Saturn, as well as PC in 1997. It was developed by Traveler's Tales, who nowadays are known for making LEGO games and absolutely nothing else. 3D Blast came out during a weird era for Sega. Their first 3D console, the Saturn, was struggling for a multitude of reasons, one of which being the lack of a big mainline Sonic the Hedgehog game. As it turns out, Sonic Team was developing just that, with the working title Sonic Extreme. Unfortunately, thanks to internal drama at Sega, that game never saw the light of day. This left a Sonic-shaped hole in the Saturn's library, which would be filled by Sonic 3D Blast, originally intended as a Genesis exclusive. The game would later end up coming to Windows as well, which is the version I'll be using for footage, but I have extensively played the original Genesis version as well. With that in mind, review starts now. Despite the title, Sonic 3D Blast isn't actually a 3D game, but rather a 2D game with an isometric perspective and pre-rendered sprites. Keeping in mind that it was targeting a 16-bit console, this game is pretty impressive graphically. The art style is similar to what previous Sonic games were going for: vibrant colors, shiny toy-like character models, and surreal environments that still manage to have a sense of place. The music is also great in both versions. You'd think the Saturn version would just use the Genesis soundtrack with higher quality instruments, but they instead took the Sonic CD approach of having entirely different compositions. While I love both soundtracks, I tend to prefer the Saturn version for its more environmental approach. It's hard to explain, but it just feels right for this era of Sonic. 3D Blast takes a similar approach to bringing the Hedgehog to 3D as Super Mario 64, shifting the focus from platforming to collecting. Unlike Mario 64 though, 3D Blast is still fairly linear. You're required to find all 5 of the captured flickies in a given area before you can move on to the next one. There's little in the way of optional content outside of the special stages, which as far as I know don't unlock anything special. While I love the presentation in this title, I have a couple bones to pick with the gameplay. First of all, Sonic's control, while not the worst I've seen, is a tad slippery. This, combined with the sluggish camera, means you're going to run face first into hazards fairly often, which is a problem considering that you drop all of your flickies upon getting hit. My other big issue is that while the level themes are memorable, the level layouts are usually not. There's a huge lack of unique landmarks or signposting, and because of this, it's easy to get lost while attempting to track down the last flicking. All this said though, these problems become easier to look past upon repeat playthroughs. In fact, 3D Blast becomes oddly addicting after a while, not not unlike its side-scrolling counterparts, and this makes it easier to appreciate what the game does right. You'd think the isometric perspective would make depth perception difficult, but the levels are designed in such a way where that's rarely an issue, and while I criticize Sonic's movement for being too slippery, he controls fairly well aside from that. He may not have pinball physics, but he does have a dedicated roll button, and I can't say the same for Sonic's actual 3D debut. Sonic 3D Blast is far from perfect, but it was nonetheless a solid stab at making a more open-ended classic Sonic experience, with impressive visuals and music for the hardware it was working with.
The Ark is now under our control. The Ark is now...
I think I just heard someone's voice.
Shadow the Hedgehog released in 2005 for the Xbox, PlayStation 2, and GameCube. After Sonic Heroes, Sega received a bunch of letters from 9-year-olds asking them to give Sonic a gun. Of course, since Sonic the Hedgehog is a family-friendly series, they did the responsible thing and gave it to Shadow instead. Early on, Sonic Team were aiming for the T for Teen rating for this game, but during development, the ESRB introduced E10+, which prompted Sonic Team to change course a bit. That said, they really pushed that rating as far as they could to appeal to their target audience of Call of Duty obsessed preteens, resulting in a game where Shadow wields real firearms and says damn every chance he can get. I'll be playing the GameCube version for this review, much like Sonic Heroes, seeing as both games share the same engine. Shadow the Hedgehog's biggest addition to the series, aside from firearms, is that the player's in-game choices affect the story. It not only does this in an attempt to add replay value, but also to make the narrative more about character study. A lot of people have grown to appreciate this game for its portrayal of the main character, and I really can't see it. Look, I'm sorry, but this story blows. Shadow has amnesia after his fall in Sonic Adventure 2, and now has to recollect his memories. During this journey, he can join Zavok, Infinite, Black Doom, team up with Sonic and friends, or go solo and figure things out on his own. It's not the worst setup ever, but it's completely ruined by the convoluted plot and horrible writing. I often hear people say that this game is one of the best interpretations of the character, and really? The game where Shadow says this?
This is like taking candy from a baby, which is fine by me.
The graphics are decent enough for the time, but the visual design reeks of 2000's Edge, and not the good kind. Nearly everything is made up of grays and browns, and while it's not as ugly as Sonic 06, it does make it hard to discern the different types of enemies, and you'll see why that's a problem in a second. The music, on the other hand, is one of the only things I like about this game. The soundtrack gravitates towards genres like industrial rock and metal, and not only does it fit what this game is going for, a lot of the songs are great to listen to on their own, at least if you're like me and are into those genres. But if you thought we were done talking about games where you collect things in a linear stage with slippery controls, think again. Shadow is basically an expanded version of the Chaotix levels in Sonic Heroes. These stages have two optional objectives: the good route, which usually requires killing all of the aliens, and the evil route, which usually requires killing all of the Gut Soldiers. Emphasis on all. If you miss a single one of these guys, you're going to have to backtrack. The game does try to make this easier by letting you teleport to any activated checkpoint, but all this does is make it possible, not fun. Distinguishing the two types of gray enemies against the gray environment while you're moving at high speed might as well be impossible. Shadow also has two special moves, the evil one, Chaos Blast, and the good one, Chaos Control. Oh, and you can bet I'm only talking about the alignment on the latter, because this thing is useless. It skips a large chunk of the level without killing any of the enemies along the way, so all it really does is make your life harder unless you're going for the neutral route. Overall, Shadow the Hedgehog is a horrible game on nearly all accounts. It butchers an already ruined character with pointlessly edgy writing, it fails to make its branching paths worth pursuing, and even if you just go through the neutral route, the clumsy controls ensure that the experience will be miserable anyway.
Gotta make sure I dodge those iron balls. Oh no!
Sonic and the Secret Rings released in 2007 for the Nintendo Wii, being the first entry of 2 in the Sonic Storybook series. Yeah, it was, rather short-lived. During the development of Sonic 06, Sonic Team had to split after they received development kits for the Wii, which they quickly realized was significantly underpowered compared to the Xbox 360 and PS3. Instead of making a separate version of 06 for the Wii, the other half of the team decided to make an entirely different project that would take advantage of the system's motion controls. The result was Sonic and the Secret Rings, a game where Sonic enters the world of the Arabian Nights. Sonic's nap is suddenly interrupted by a genie named Shara, who explains that the world within her magic book is under threat of destruction by the evil Razor Jin, who talks like a Simpsons character for some reason.
I suppose a suitable punishment is in order then.
So Sonic agrees to help her out and sets on an adventure through the Arabian Nights. While this is a bizarre concept that shouldn't work, Secret Rings actually surprised me with how competent its writing is. The dialogue is witty and there's some solid character interactions here. My only big gripe is that several characters within this world are represented by Sonic's friends, and every time he meets them he has the exact same exchange of, "Hey, it's so-and-so." "What? I'm not so-and-so, I'm such and such." "Oh, okay." The presentation is pretty solid though. Graphically, this is a contender for one of the best looking Wii games I've ever played. The character models have a decent poly count, the environments are fully realized, and there's a lot of impressive lighting effects such as screen space reflections that make this look almost like an early PS3 game, especially with the 60 FPS code on Dolphin. The soundtrack is also alright, though I wouldn't say it's top tier. It blends modern Sonic's usual rock style with Middle Eastern instruments, which is cool, but a lot of the level themes make use of repetitive lyrics that hurt the tracks overall, especially when combined with the already repetitive gameplay. Secret Rings throws out the core Sonic formula in exchange for a more simplified approach. This is to accommodate the motion controls, which are, frankly, horrible. Sonic is constantly moving forward, like one of those mobile endless runner games, and you have to tilt the Wii remote to move him side to side. This is the only input here that feels natural for motion. The rest are actions that a button could have done just as well. The homing attack now requires you to shake the remote, and even when you're violently thrashing the thing, this only has maybe a 75% success rate. The same can be said about moving backwards, requiring you to tilt the remote to an uncomfortable degree. These controls are a deal breaker for a lot of people, and while I don't always agree with the general consensus on these games, in this case I definitely do. Secret Rings also has a mission structure that, at first, seems to mimic something like Super Mario 64, with multiple objectives in each level that you can do out of order. And while you can do that, I don't think there's ever any point where the game gives you any wiggle room. As far as I know, you have to complete every single mission to complete the game. That wouldn't be so bad if these missions were actually good, but well, they're not. Beat this level without breaking any jars. Beat this level without checkpoints. Kill a certain amount of enemies in this level. Break eggs or something, I don't freaking know. This is all just mindless filler to disguise how few levels this game actually has, and combined with the motion controls, Secret Rings is an absolute slog gameplay-wise. It does make up for some of it with a decent story and impressive visuals, but it's not enough for me to ever recommend this game. Sonic Unleashed released in 2008 for 7th generation consoles, and since it came out during that weird time period where everyone still had a PS2, it was released on there as well. Like with 06, Sonic Team once again took the divide and conquer approach, but instead of doing another Secret Rings, I know, I'm getting to it, the devs decided to make two versions of the same game, one for PS3 and Xbox 360, and the other for Wii and PS2. And since I did an extensive retrospective on the former, in this review I'll be talking about the latter. This version was co-developed with Dimps, who were basically Sega's B team for Sonic at the time. They usually did handheld games, but this time they were brought on for the day stages in the Wii and PS2 version of Unleashed. I assume because they were the ones to pioneer the boost formula with Sonic Rush. I'll be focusing on the Wii version for this review, using the GameCube control scheme because I put up with more than enough motion controls for one day. I'll get to it. Also, I'll be referring to the PS3 and Xbox 360 releases as the HD version, and the Wii and PS2 releases as the SD version. I know the HD moniker isn't exactly accurate, seeing as that version doesn't even run at full 720p, but since that's the naming convention everybody else uses, it's gonna be less confusing if I just roll with it. Review starts now. The story here is the same as the HD version, but presented in a rather incoherent way. The transition between pre-rendered and in-engine cutscenes in that version was already jarring, but the SD version takes this a step further. It runs the whole gamut, including gorgeous CGI cinematics, crappy MP4s of the HD version cutscenes, and PNGs talking to you as if this was a visual novel or something. The presentation in general is very mixed. As far as visuals go, while they're not terrible or anything, you can tell they were targeting PS2 with these chunky models and low-res textures. It does retain the excellent art direction from the HD version, but the visuals nonetheless feel like a downgrade coming from Secret Rings. As for the music, it's the same as the HD version, so there's nothing for me to add there. Gameplay-wise, SD Unleashed is practically a whole new game compared to its HD counterpart. It hits the same beats, having both daytime boost stages and nighttime Werehog stages, but everything else from the controls to the level design to the progression structure is entirely different. Unfortunately, I'd overall say these changes are for the worse. The mission structure from Secret Rings returns for this game, though they at least had the decency to not hide it this time. Instead of doing missions one at a time, the game has you do several missions in one run for each level. While this is still clearly filler, I at least respect the way they structured it a lot more than Secret Rings, and in one of the few objective improvements over HD Unleashed, the Sun and Moon medals are awarded for performance instead of being hidden in annoying places. The gameplay itself is a bit of a mixed bag. The controls in both day and night stages are mostly worse than the HD version due to a lot of tiny design choices that quickly add up. Things like the boost being separated into one-use chunks, the stiff turning, and the Werehog's grab requiring you to hold the button instead of tapping it. I find it especially odd how much they changed the boost controls, considering that Dimps was involved. On the other hand though, the level design is actually pretty solid in the day stages. While Sonic's controls aren't as responsive, the levels actually properly accommodate them, which I can't say for the HD version. The Werehog stages aren't nearly as good, unfortunately, though at least they're not upwards of 20 minutes long. SD Unleashed is a bizarre experience coming from the HD version, and I unfortunately wouldn't call it a better one. The day stages and medal system are improved, sure, but the weird story presentation, butcher controls, and repetitive mission structure make this game feel disjointed. I could see why some people might prefer this release, but I'm personally gonna stick to the HD version on this one. Sonic and the Black Knight released in 2009 for the Nintendo Wii, being the second and final entry in the Sonic Storybook series. Interestingly, it still uses the same engine and a similar gameplay style to Secret Rings, despite releasing after Unleashed. But while Secret Rings saw the Blue Blur adventuring through the Arabian Nights, Black Knight puts a sword in his hand and throws him into the world of the Knights of the Round Table. Black Knight seems to be generally favored over Secret Rings, though most still consider it to be a bad game. So what do I think? Well, from what I've played, I think the answer might just surprise you. Sonic is once again brought into a fantasy world, this time being summoned by a sorceress named Merlina. She explains that King Arthur has become corrupt from the power of Excalibur and needs to be put in his place. There's a twist later on that flips the story on its head, but I won't spoil it here. Why? Because the story is actually really solid. It retains the witty writing from Secret Rings, but it has a more compelling concept. Sonic's not just a fish out of water this time, he's a fish out of water that learns how to wield a sword and puts legendary knights with years of experience to shame. It's awesome. And the best part is that Sonic is portrayed excellently, debatably one of his best renditions to this day. The presentation is just as good as Secret Rings, with a diverse selection of environments that still fit within the medieval theme. And the soundtrack? Oh man! They combine metal and orchestral instruments to create this amazing sound that fits so incredibly well. It makes every level feel so much more epic, and it stands as one of my favorite OSTs in the entire franchise. So what about the gameplay? Well, it uses a similar format to Secret Rings, but there are quite a few improvements here. First of all, Black Knight uses the Wii Remote and Nunchuck combo, and movement is now done using the analog stick. That's right, the motion-based movement from Secret Rings is gone, and it feels infinitely better. This was done, of course, to free up the Wii Remote for the game's new sword fighting mechanics. Now, I'll say this right off the bat. Black Knight's swordplay is, at first, not all that deep. You shake the remote, it swings your sword. You press the defend button, you defend. However, later on you'll unlock a move called Soul Surge, and this one ability completely transforms the entire experience. Basically, this meter fills up when you collect fairies, and activating Soul Surge will deplete it. When it's active, Sonic will boost at lightning speed towards your next opponent, and when you reach the enemy, you can shake the remote at just the right time to do a super powerful attack. Chaining these together makes what is otherwise a glorified waggle fest way more fun than it has any right to be. However, Black Knight is definitely not perfect. For one thing, it retains the same mission structure from Secret Rings, though thankfully it doesn't try to hide it this time. The bosses are an enigma to me. Most of them I was able to beat eventually, but I never understood what exactly I did differently. The second King Arthur battle ended up being where I stopped playing, so fair warning, the game could get worse past this fight for all I know. All of that said though, I was thoroughly surprised by Black Knight, and what I've played alone is enough for me to at least recommend it over Secret Rings. The swordplay is fun, the soundtrack makes you feel powerful, and the story was so compelling that I was eager to push on through the more tedious missions. Sonic Lost World released in 2013 for the Wii U and 3DS. The 3DS version was co-developed with DIMS, just like SD Unleashed, and is the version we'll be talking about here. So let's do that. The story is the same, or in other words just as awful, as the Wii U version, but unlike the previous DIMS-developed game in this video, it hasn't been butchered in any significant way. The cutscenes are lower quality, but that's to be expected with the 3DS. As for the presentation in general, it's not too shabby for the hardware. While the models are lower poly than the Wii U version, the art style still shines through, and if you're playing on original hardware, you'll have the benefit of the system's glasses-free 3D, which is used to excellent effect. Like SD Unleashed, the music here is the same, so I have nothing to add that I haven't already said in my review of the Wii U version. The gameplay at a surface level is very similar, with its expansive moveset and gravity-bending level design. However, when you actually play this version, you'll quickly realize that the similarities end there. Somehow, the movement here is way better than the Wii U version. It still doesn't have real Sonic physics, don't get me wrong, but nearly every other complaint I had with the controls has been addressed here. The tutorials are actually helpful, the jump doesn't make you lose momentum, and that stupid suicide jump with the wall run is completely gone. Pressing A now makes you hop to the adjacent wall, as it should. The level design is also completely different, though unlike the controls, I wouldn't say it's consistently better. To give credit where it's due, it definitely takes advantage of Sonic's new moves a lot more than the Wii U version does, and since the controls don't suck, the level designers were able to create some genuinely challenging platforming sections that really impressed me. However, like on Wii U, it wasn't long before that Lost World fatigue began to settle in. From the Desert World onwards, the stages start incorporating tedious puzzle gimmicks that eventually made me put the game down. From what I've played, it doesn't seem to get any worse than the Wii U version, but that's not exactly a high bar to cross. Sonic Lost World on the 3DS is, well, it's still Sonic Lost World. However, it does fix a lot of issues from the Wii U, and it makes me wonder why Sonic Team didn't take notes for that version. I wasn't particularly motivated to finish this game myself, but if you're wanting to play Lost World, I'd still recommend this over the awful HD version.
You there! Could I buy... borrow a bit of your time?
Sonic Boom: Rise of Lyric released in 2014 for the Nintendo Wii U. It was part of a larger initiative that would attempt to revitalize the Sonic brand. Aside from Rise of Lyric, there were 2 games for the 3DS and even a TV show that ran for 2 seasons. The Sonic Boom initiative was short-lived though, and it's not hard to see why. For some reason, Sega's idea of revitalizing the brand was covering the characters in sports tape and shoving them into the most generic world imaginable. But what about Rise of Lyric? Well, this game is pretty infamous for its disastrous launch. Sega outsourced development to Big Red Button, who initially designed the game to target the PS4 and Xbox One. However, Sega would later sign a deal with Nintendo to release 3 games exclusively for the Wii U, Sonic Boom included. So Big Red Button had to crunch as fast as they could to get this thing working on the Wii U. Now, unlike Sonic 06, Rise of Lyric did see a few patches after its launch, one of them being over a gigabyte, which was massive for the time. I'll be reviewing the most updated release of this game because 1, it was a digital download, so I didn't have much choice, and 2, spoiler alert, there's a lot more wrong with this game than just the glitches. So let's talk about it. Sonic and the gang come across an ancient temple while trying to escape from Eggman's robots. In this temple, they accidentally release Black Doom, Zavok, Infinite, Lyric. Sorry, I don't know why I always get these guys confused. Their personalities are so unique. Anyway, Lyric is gonna take over the world or whatever, so now Sonic and friends have to stop him. The plot in Sonic Boom is extremely basic, so the dialogue tries to make up for it with that classic Pontac and Graph writing, and this might just be their worst script ever. Seriously, some of the jokes here make the baldy nose hair scene look like a comedic masterpiece by comparison. The presentation isn't great either. I won't crap on the graphics since the developers were crunched, but are these environments really the best they could come up with? Everything looks exactly the same. Generic temple, generic forest, generic temple, generic outpost, generic temple. The music doesn't help either, it's all just vaguely cinematic sounding sludge that blends together. I couldn't remember a single track from this game to save my life. If I had to praise one element of the visuals, it'd be the animation. Sonic and Friends have nice and smooth animations in both gameplay and cutscenes, so credit where it's due. Unfortunately, that's the only redeeming quality here. As for the gameplay, I guess Sega's idea for this new direction for the series was to make it a Lego game? I mean a crappy Lego game, but I don't know how else to describe it. Sonic Boom's gameplay is largely focused on puzzles and combat, two things that people apparently really want from these games. Calling these puzzles is generous though, all you have to do for most of these is hit the glowing green switch, they don't really evolve past that. The combat is also terrible and makes me appreciate Frontier's combat a lot more. At least in that game you're doing Sonic-y things to the enemies, homing attack to lock on, quick step to dodge, and special moves that incorporate the spectacle that these games are known for. Meanwhile in Sonic Boom, all you really do is wail at the enemies until they're dead. It's worse than the Hedgehog combat, and worse still, there's a lot of it.
It's over? Oh, it's over! Whatever that was, I never want to go through it again.
I couldn't agree more. Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric not only feels nothing like a Sonic game, it's a horrible game in general. With its mind-numbingly easy puzzles and painfully tedious combat, I'm glad the fanbase has universally agreed to not consider this thing mainline. Sonic Dream Team released in 2023 exclusively for the Apple Arcade subscription service. Tim Apple commissioned Sega and Hardlight to produce a Sonic game, and this was the result. Despite the disappointment of it being exclusive to Apple products, fans have otherwise been praising Dream Team, which made me pretty excited to play it. So, what do I think? Dr. Eggman wants to use a mysterious device called the Reverie to make his dreams come true, so Sonic and friends enter his dreams to collect the Dream Orbs and foil his plans. It's a basic setup, but Ian Flynn returns from Sonic Frontiers to write the script, and it already feels like he's improved. The dialogue makes the story come across more so as quaint and charming, rather than outright boring like Sonic Boom. The visuals are gorgeous, thanks in part to the game's strong art style. The environments are varied and surreal, which I was happy to see after Frontiers disappointed in that department. However, that's not to say that Dream Team doesn't have its own low points, and one of those is the soundtrack. Yeah, the soundtrack in a modern Sonic game. It's not unpleasant or anything, don't get me wrong, but it lacks energy in both its instrumentation and its composition, making these otherwise creative levels feel more samey than they really are. As for gameplay, thankfully it's mostly positive. Dream Team uses the boost formula as a base, but it has a completely original player controller that feels amazing. In fact, I'd say it's one of the best controlling 3D Sonic games ever, right below the adventure games. The turning is responsive, the boost destroys enemies, and there's even 360-degree momentum. I can only hope Sonic Team's taking notes, because this is how you make the boost fun, not whatever Frontiers was doing. Dream Team also has a mission system, but it's more Mario 64 than Secret Rings, thankfully. There's multiple orbs in each level, but you don't have to collect every single one to progress. Unfortunately though, I'd still say that it requires too many orbs, which leads me to my biggest problem with this game. Sonic Dream Team never really gets good. The movement is fun, yeah, and the level design is competent, but the game never evolves its mechanics, instead opting to rehash the same missions multiple times in each level. At a certain point, the game becomes monotonous due to a lack of escalating challenge. I know this is technically only one problem, but it's a big one, and it was enough for me to end up being pretty disappointed overall. Sonic Dream Team is a good game, and for a mobile game, I'm impressed by its ambition, but I ultimately can't say that it's the masterpiece everyone says it is. With every minor 3D Sonic game reviewed, let's see how they rank overall. Number 8, Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric. This game has almost zero redeeming qualities as a game. The animation is nice, but the gameplay, story, writing, and music all fail to be even remotely engaging. I'd sooner play Sonic 06 again than I would Sonic Boom. Number 7, Shadow the Hedgehog. While the over-the-top story can be fun to laugh at, the game itself is an absolute chore, especially when you're trying to engage with its main selling point, the player choice mechanic. At least it has good music. Number 6, Sonic and the Secret Rings. I'm definitely going to get hate for putting this game over Shadow the Hedgehog, but here's the thing. Shadow the Hedgehog is a bad game with a bad story, while Secret Rings is a bad game with a competent story. Number 5, Sonic Lost World for the 3DS. While the Wii U version had terrible controls with level design that didn't take advantage of them, the 3DS version almost has the opposite problem. The movement is better, but the level design gets too demanding too quickly. Still overall better than the Wii U version, but not by much. much. Number 4, Sonic Unleashed for the PS2 and Wii. I had pretty mixed feelings on the HD version of Unleashed, and the SD version is no different in that regard. The day stages are solid, while the night stages are tedious. The story is just as good, but it's presented in a bizarre way. Which version is better really comes down to preference. Number 3, Sonic and the Black Knight. This game has its fair share of problems, but I was still blown away by how well it managed to salvage a formula that seemed to be dead in the water. The combat is shockingly fun, and the story and soundtrack never fail to get me pumped. Number 2, Sonic 3D Blast. I'm surprised I'm putting this game so high on the list, considering its myriad of control and level design issues. The thing is, there's a very replayable and engaging game under its deceptively jank surface, and just thinking about it tempts me to boot it up again and rescue those flickies. Number 1, Sonic Dream Team. This game taking number 1 is a hard pill to swallow for me, seeing as the overall experience was rather disappointing. However, while Dream Team does get old after a while, the core gameplay is rock solid, and I hope that Sonic Team takes a page from this game's book for whatever's coming next for the Blue Blur. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out my other Sonic content and subscribe for more video game content just like this. You can also become a member for just $1 per month to get your name in the credits, exclusive emojis, and a special channel in my Discord server. But either way, stay tuned, thanks for watching, and as always, enjoy life.